Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's Culture Report. I'm Jamal Simon.
And I'm Antonia Velez.
And we have lots to get into. We have a couple of pieces that we worked on. We spoke to a couple of people in the community who were directly impacted by, well, not necessarily directly or indirectly impacted by the events of October 7th. And we know we just hit that 1 year mark. So definitely want you to stick around for that.
Absolutely.
But first, we're going to give you guys a couple headlines you may have missed, probably not. First, let's start off with the Victoria's Secret fashion show. So Victoria's Secret made its grand return this week. Tuesday night, the brand held its famed fashion show for the first time in 6 years. Back in 2019, when the show was paused indefinitely, the company was facing a ton of backlash for its lack of diversity. So with this comeback, inclusivity was at the forefront with models of different body types and ages. This also marked the most racially diverse runway in the show's history, with many Black and brown women sporting their natural hair as well. Love that. And the big shift didn't come without criticism. Many viewers say it came off as inauthentic given the history of the company.
And right now, Sean Diddy Combs is facing 6 new lawsuits from men, women, and a teenager, accusing him of sexual assault. Now, all the new plaintiffs are anonymous, but Combs' lawyer is now requesting a federal judge to release the names of the alleged victims, arguing Combs cannot fairly defend himself without knowing their identities. The newest alleged victims join 120 others, all represented by the same attorneys. Combs has pleaded not guilty to charges related to sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, and prostitution.
And we are just a little less than 3 weeks away from Election Day, and the race for the White House has never looked more deadlocked than this election cycle. So the most recent NBC polls among registered voters show Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump each have about 48% of support. So in the meantime, the Democrat and Republican nominee are making stops in crucial swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia.
And last week, Trump made a stop in Aurora, Colorado, keeping a promise he made in a campaign speech back in September. Now, this pledge to visit went hand in hand with his debunked claims that Aurora and apartment buildings in the city have been taken over by the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. Now, this misinformation is something we've been following for a while now. He first echoed these false allegations, which were largely started by conservative leaders in Aurora during the September 10th presidential debate.
And you see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that she and Biden led into our country.
All right, so after that debate, city leaders and Aurora police released a joint statement saying that the gang had not taken over the city and that its impact was isolated to only a few properties. Still, Trump continued spreading these misinformed claims all the way up to his rally in Aurora, where he repeated them throughout his 75-minute speech.
I will rescue Aurora and every town that has been invaded and conquered. These towns have been conquered. Explain that to your governor. He doesn't have a clue.
Now, many Aurora residents pushed back against Trump's claims, from migrant advocates to city leaders, and among them was Aurora's Republican Mayor Mike Kaufman, who released a statement after Trump's speech which said the city and state have not been taken over or invaded by occupied by migrant gangs.
Now, Kaufman also said he was disappointed that Trump, who did not stray from the rally location in the outskirts of Aurora, did not experience more of the city for himself. These sentiments were echoed by a tenant at one of the apartment complexes tied to inaccurate takeover allegations who spoke about Trump's claims in light of his visit.
La cosa es que tú no puedes jugar el libro por la portada. Tú tienes que ver cómo es las personas. Todos no somos iguales, ¿me entiendes? Y él tiene que ver que tiene que darse cuenta, porque todo por las redes dicen muchas cosas. Tú tienes que llegarte al sitio y ver cómo son las personas. Y ahí tú sí puedes, como te digo, hablar de las personas, pero tú no puedes hablar de las personas si tú no sabes cómo son.
And, you know, what that tenant was saying is was echoed with by a lot of other statements that were mentioned by other tenants who we've spoken with in the past. This has been going on for weeks and weeks. I'm sure everyone has seen something related to claims related to Aurora or Springfield, Ohio in the last couple of weeks. So yeah, it's important to talk about the fact that these claims have been debunked and yet have still been continued to be spread because words have impacts. And something that tenants have told us in the past is that these claims have consequences. Like a lot of them had a lot of trouble finding jobs because when they would say that they were migrants or that they were Venezuelan, they would immediately, get turned down, or it was just hard for them to find jobs. And that's just a small example of just the consequences that they've been facing due to these misinformed claims.
Yeah, also why it's so important for you to go out and do your own research when it comes to voting.
Absolutely.
You cannot listen to like every single thing that the candidates say and take it as gospel because,
Even us, fact check us.
Please fact check us.
Do your own research. Yes, absolutely. And that takes us, yes.
Yes, we have a couple of topics. Here's the wheel, guys. We have the wheel of, what'd you call it last time?
Wheel of issues.
The wheel of issues. We'll say that. Okay, and these are just some of the things that you guys need to go out and fact check and do. We know ballots went out this week, so before you cast your ballot, make sure you go ahead and do this. So let's see which one for today. I'm really bad at spinning this.
You got it. Book bans.
Book bans. I mean, we know Colorado has had plenty of experience with our book bans here, which is kind of a wild experience. Especially that it seems that the ones recently seem to be wanting to censor queer voices and also Black voices. And I know also it's not only books, they're also trying to change curriculum, which can be very harmful, especially when it comes to the history of marginalized communities.
Absolutely, and it's not just Colorado, it's other states as well. But just going back to the queer perspective and the Black perspective, I think at the center of the conversations that are being had about these book bans is that it really is restricting the knowledge that people who could have access to these books can get. And I think for a lot of young queer people to not have access to these books, that just kind of, to me, heightens the possible personal repercussions that they may have in a world where that's very heteronormative as they're trying to kind of navigate and grow and come to their own. Same thing with, Black stories. Censoring Black voices also goes hand in hand or directly correlates to racism, unchecked implicit biases. And so I think the conversations, at least that I've been having about book bans, are like, what are the possible repercussions that not having access to this information can have on young people? Yeah,
and I feel like sometimes it can also like kind of not rewrite history. Well, some, like if you don't teach people certain history, then they won't know it exists, and we're, of course, bound to repeat it. However, but it also kind of changes society because if kids are in school and they don't see any books about queer people, they probably don't know that they're out there, and they probably are having all these emotions and these feelings, and they're like, I must be weird. I must be like something's wrong with me because I don't see this represented anywhere else. And
no,
I'm not
it's
saying,
isolating, yeah.
It's really isolating. So it's like you should be able to have some sort of representation in the literature you read, in the shows you watch, or whatever. Like, of course, I don't want like any kind of sexual, like crazy books in the schools either. And I don't think that's what people are fighting for. And I feel like that's often what people are putting out there when they're like, oh, well, this isn't appropriate. Well, I was like, I don't necessarily, well, I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think that a queer book should be inappropriate for anyone because there are queer kids out there.
Exactly.
Like Ashton Brooks said, former co-host of the Culture Report, said, some of y'all kids are gay. And
that's
I'm sorry.
just the reality.
And that's just the reality of it.
So keep having conversations, doing your research, and
So we know that another issue that's top of mind for voters is the Israel-Hamas conflict in the Middle East. So how candidates choose to navigate the United States' role in the war is a big deciding factor when it comes to how people vote.
Absolutely. And this past week, the Middle East recognized the one-year mark of the Hamas attack on Israel that killed 1,200 people and began the most significant military engagement in the past 50 years. In the fighting that followed, more than 41,000 Palestinians have been killed.
And it's important to mention that this grim milestone came during the holiest time of year for the Jewish community. So we sat down with Rabbi Joseph Black from Temple Emmanuel in Denver to hear about the significance of the High Holy Days and to discuss how he's seen his community be impacted since the most recent war began.
And we recognize that Israeli and Jewish people are not the only communities impacted by October 7th or the events that followed. And we felt it was important to also give a platform to a Palestinian voice, representing a group that is also grieving at this time. We conducted Rabbi Black's interview first due to scheduling reasons, so that's the one we'll start with now, and then we'll introduce you to a Palestinian community organizer here in Colorado.
I am Rabbi Joseph Black. I'm the senior rabbi of Temple Emmanuel. Dressed in white, our souls take flight. The song is called At One, and At One is sort of a pun on the word atone, at one. And Yom Kippur, it's a 24-hour day. It's the most intense and holy day in the Jewish calendar. The high holidays begin with Rosh Hashanah, which means the beginning of the year, and that is a day of proclaiming a new year. It's a day that's a joyous day, but it also has a somber tone to it as we prepare ourselves for the 10 days that follow. We're in the midst of what are called the 10 days of repentance that conclude with Yom Kippur. Nervously we say our prayers, wondering how our souls have fared. It's a day when we fast, when we ask God and those around us to forgive us for our sins and to prepare ourselves for beginning a new year with a clean slate, as it were. This past Monday, we commemorated the one-year anniversary of the Hamas attack, where over 1,200 Israelis, Jews, Americans, Palestinians, Bedouin Arabs were murdered in a horrific terrorist attack. I'm giving a sermon on Yom Kippur, where one of the things that I'm saying is that all of us are October 8th Jews. That's a phrase that was coined by a writer in the New York Times. And the idea is that the day after the attack, the world kind of stopped. I think we are all in a state of limbo. We're very concerned about what is happening in Israel. We are concerned about the hostages and their families. We're concerned about the innocent civilians caught up in the crossfire of this war. We're also cognizant of the trauma and the destruction that this war has wreaked on citizens of Gaza and now in northern Israel and southern Lebanon. I was in Israel last November, a month after it attacked. That's where I got this little tag. This is a tag that almost everyone in Israel is wearing now, and it says, "Our hearts are held captive in Gaza. Bring them home." When you go to Israel, it's sort of a duality. People are trying their best to live a normal life because that's a statement to those who would try to disrupt life. But of course, everyone knows someone or is related to someone who is either killed or kept or in captive, who is fighting either in Gaza, in Lebanon, on the West Bank. So, and here in America, we are very worried and very concerned about our loved ones, and we want this war to end, but we also want to make sure that what happened on October 7th can never happen again. This was the worst attack against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. How we govern, how the state of Israel is governed. I don't agree with everything that the current government in Israel is doing. I have some severe concerns. It's only been 75 years that the Jewish people have actually had the power and the ability to defend itself. And how we use that power and how the state of Israel uses that power is a very important question that needs to be debated and is frankly being debated in the state of Israel as well. Everyone's against war. Nobody wants war. But to say that Israel has no right to defend itself and that Zionism as a movement, which is basically a movement that says the Jewish people have the right to live in freedom, in peace, to defend itself in their homeland, is something that I strongly support. This is a time when we need to look deeply and question, and it's important to question. It's important to say, is this the right thing to do? And there are many people who come to different conclusions than I might have, and I respect that and I want to hear that. But to say that because I am a Zionist, or because I am a Jew, or because I support the state of Israel, means that I am somehow anathema or a pariah is something that worries me greatly. This is a time of year of introspection in the Jewish community, where we look deep within ourselves and our souls and ask God to forgive us and ask others to forgive us as well. So I think we can grieve the loss of life and we can pray for a peace settlement, that the hostages will be released and that this conflict will come to an end very soon.
All right, now we want to introduce you to Abdullah Alaga, who sat down with us to discuss what the one-year mark since October 7th means to him and his community.
It's very jarring to see a text from a relative or a friend from Gaza about some bombing that was a block away from their home and that they don't know if they're going to survive the night. And then on the flip side, I just have to like dial into a meeting and act like everything is normal. My name is Abdullah El-Agha. I'm a community organizer. Yeah, I think for the Palestinian community, what this week signifies is a year of us witnessing just the most horrific things happening to our friends and our families in Gaza. You know, the people of Gaza have been without water, without electricity, and they've been without food, they've been without medical care, as virtually all hospitals in Gaza have been bombed. All of the students in Gaza have missed the entire last year of school. Virtually every university has been destroyed, and you know, over 12,000 children have been killed. So it's been a really horrific year, and I think the worst part of it for us as Palestinians here in America is really seeing how not only we've been sort of forgotten and how we're sort of just an afterthought, but how we've been really vilified and demonized. And you know, this anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab rhetoric has really ramped up in a ferocious way. And there's just been a kind of unprecedented rise in anti-Arab attacks. But we never hear anything about, you know, the rise in Islamophobia, the rise in anti-Arab hatred. I think for me, the effects that my family has experienced has really exacerbated this feeling that I have that, you know, my government and my country doesn't really care about me. Two of my cousins were abducted by Israeli forces in the middle of the night, and they've spent, you know, the better part of the last year languishing in Israeli prisons. And yet I don't hear my government here talking about them, and they're hostages. They're American hostages. Both my cousins, Hashim and Bara, are American citizens. My relatives have been killed over the past year. It feels as though there's not really a second thought given to the loss of Palestinian life. Our suffering, our pain has been very normalized. This kind of anti-Arab hatred, this normalization of our suffering that we really experienced after 9/11, you know, over 20 years ago, it feels like deja vu. It feels like we're living that once again. Our stories aren't really told. Our side of the story is something that's very often been forgotten or left to the wayside, or even worse, framed as something that it's not. So I think it's really important for people to just kind of step out and you know, try to ask some questions. Talk to your Arab neighbor, talk to your Muslim coworker. Just try to have a conversation. Try to learn a little bit more about what's going on. You know, if you know a Palestinian, just talk to them. As a community organizer, I've been organizing events here for years now. And the way that our events have grown over the past year is really astounding. It's really beautiful to see how people have really embraced not just the Palestinian community, but also the Palestinian cause. A lot of the way that this is framed is you know, the peace process. How can we get peace? How can we have peace? And of course, everyone wants peace, but peace without self-determination is worthless. And for 76 years, Palestinians have been fighting for justice and for self-determination, and we've been vilified and demonized for it. And it's been a struggle, but as I said, people are starting to wake up. People are starting to see the reality of what's happened over the past year, of what's been happening for the past 76 years. And while it is a very dark moment right now, I do feel very hopeful for the future.
All right, I'm so happy that we were able to sit down with them and actually hear from people who were impacted or people who know people who are impacted, and actually give those people that are in the community that platform to share their voice, share their experience, so people know what's going on within the community.
Totally, because I think that both sides of the story, or all sides of the story, are never 100% represented 100% of the time. And this is not by any means us trying to reduce this conflict to just two perspectives or saying that these two people represent the communities that they're in, but we still felt that it was important to kind of give them a voice and a platform for them to speak their truth, because numbers are really important, right? Especially within journalism, numbers are very important, but I think it can be easy to lose real stories that impact real people behind those numbers. And so that's why we kind of felt that it was important to chat with them and just see what they had to say.
Yeah, and especially since I know our last episode when we discussed the conflict, we know that was right before the October 7th milestone. And we just decided to, go ahead, let's give people a brief update about what's going on there. But we did leave out some of the cultural context, cultural significance of the time, especially since it is the holiest time of year for Jewish people. But we really didn't want to have a conversation amongst ourselves. We thought we would hold off for a week or two to make sure that we could put in work to find those people in the community so we could give them a chance to talk, which I'm really happy we did.
Yeah, I think it was really important, and it was just really impactful to hear their stories. And I don't know, I think that anyone who watches those videos and listens to the words that they have to say, and I wish, by the way, that we could have included the full duration of the interviews, because it was just really impactful to hear their words. But I think everyone who listens can take one or two things away. And yeah, I'm just really glad that we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, and as Abdullah said towards the end of his, if you don't know a Palestinian person or a Jewish person, reach out, go to the community center. These are real people. It's not just people you see on the news or people you hear stories about or read articles about.
Not just numbers.
They're real people. They're around you all the time. They're in the workplace. Say hi. I mean, you don't have to ask them about their trauma, but just get to know people.
Yeah, and to, if you have any close friends or close people in your life that you feel like you can, ask them comfortably about what's going on. I think Abdullah said that they appreciate it and want to share their piece. And so I think talking to people who are directly impacted is important when it comes to these types of stories.
Awesome. All right. Guys, thank you guys so much for joining this week's Culture Report. We'll be back to continue the conversation right here on 9 News Plus and 9news.com.